Well, ladies and gentlemen, as promised, I have another fantastic and a very fun guest to introduce you to today. Have retired, but always still a Marine, Garret Biss, who's incredibly talented with he's got several books out there, an incredible TED Talk. We'll get into all those details. But first, let's welcome him on. And, sir, if I could, just because it is the Lima Charlie show, we'll start with a little radio check. How do you read me over?
I got you loud and clear, homie.
Yeah, perfect. Lima Charlie. Yeah, Lima Charlie.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much for getting the time. I know you're super busy, and I've enjoyed watching you online for quite some time. But if we could get a little bit of a backstory first, let's go back in time and just share with our listeners your origin story, prior to the military service. What were the decisions and circumstances that led you to choose specifically the branch and
Mhm.
the career field you chose there?
Yeah, great question. So for one, Rob, thanks so much for having me here. I've been looking forward to this for some time, so I'm grateful that we finally got a chance to jump on and do this.
No,
So
absolutely.
you
Fire
want me to go
away.
back to when I got bit by a spider and I got my superpowers, or do you want me to
Yeah,
skip past
exactly. Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Exactly.
So I was born and raised in Wilmington, Delaware, and even at my father, he was in the Army in Vietnam, very short, 2.5 years. Um, So I guess maybe military had been on my mind a little bit, but there's one thing that I really started to notice as I got older. There's, I guess, really two things that kind of came together and pushed me down that path of joining the Marines. So I was always in curious about military service because one thing I noticed even at, even my teenage years, preteen years, I noticed anytime that I talked to somebody about military service, so if I was wearing like a Marine Corps t-shirt or if I was wearing some fatigues that I picked up at the surplus store, it always garnered the attention or grabbed the attention of veterans. And what I noticed was a lot of older gentlemen, typically, sometimes some women, would come up to me and they would, there was something about seeing that sparked their interest and they wanted to share something about their military service. And what I realized, or what I quickly recognized, was regardless of how old this individual was or how many decades it had been since they served, the minute they started talking about their military service, like they lit up in a new way and they had just such vivid details and memories about things that they had experienced. And I bet many times they probably remember a couple of these, years in their life that happened decades prior better than some of the things that had happened, in the last couple of years or even that
Sure.
week, that month that I was talking to them. So there's something that really kind of caught my attention about that. And I wasn't sure exactly what it was, but I knew probably the only way that I'd figure it out and really understand it or fully appreciate it was to join the military myself. And then there was this one quote, and I've heard it thousands of times. I'd probably heard it many times before then. But I was watching this movie called Dangerous Minds, and the teacher in that movie shares this phrase that once a Marine, always a Marine. And again, I've probably heard that 1,000 times, but when I heard it when I was watching this movie, something grabbed me and really sunk into into my awareness. This thought that, even as a 14, 15-year-old boy, I had no idea what the heck I was going to do with the rest of my life. I didn't know if I'd be successful. I mean, there were some indicators there that maybe I'd have some problems and maybe it wouldn't amount to too much. There were some early indicators there. So when I thought about that or when I reflected on it, I was like, man, regardless of what else I do for the rest of my life, if I go and I join and I serve in the Marines for 4 years, then at least I'll always have something to, hang my hat on, so they say, or something to be proud of, or something to kind of look back on that either, that I made an impact, that I did something, that I proved myself in a certain way. So those two things, and maybe some other things kind of came together and really encouraged me or fueled that enthusiasm to join the Marines. And then in 1999, I actually had an opportunity to graduate early from high school and head off to boot camp in March of '99.
That's fantastic. So as far as you just basically walked into a recruiter and said, "Let's go."
Yeah, it was probably one of the easiest recruits that they had.
Yeah. Well, it is the best branding. So they know they have something to offer that
That's right.
everybody wants. Few will actually go through with it.
Yeah, there's
Um,
not much convincing in the recruiter's office. It's like you come in and you've already made up your mind, especially if you're joining the Marines. You've already made up your mind. So there's maybe some details to figure out and MOS selection to do, but beyond that, pretty much when you walk in those doors, they know that they got you.
for sure, for sure. Yeah. So walk us through just kind of those entry first years. How did that, MOS training, travels, how did that start off for you?
So I stepped on the yellow footprints in Paris Island, South Carolina, March of '99. I still think back, and my mom always have a little text or a call exchange on March 10th because that's the anniversary of the day that some Lance Corporal pulled up to my, knocked on my mom's door at like 3:30 in the morning, grabbed me, and I say was kidnapped and taken to the Marines. We started like a 2-hour drive to Tampa, where I went through the MEPS, or the enlistment processing station, I believe is what it's the acronym is. But I went to MEPS out in Tampa, and then found myself on the yellow footprints many hours later, and that's the start of it. So boot camp, and then I went on to I was actually given an initial MOS of 3451, which in the Marine Corps is a fiscal budget technician. So I was convinced by my recruiter, maybe that's the one trick that he did pull on me. I initially I wanted to be an MP, so my dad was an MP in the Army, and I thought that'd be an awesome awesome experience to have, military police. Unfortunately, you have to be 19. I think at this time, I don't know if it's still the case, but you had to be 19 when you graduated from MP school, which meant I couldn't have gone to Paris Island until August. So again, I graduated early from high school. We're talking like December to March timeframe.
Yeah.
Plenty of indicators that maybe I'd mess this whole thing up. So when I was offered, I got a phone call. Hey, can you leave this week to join the Marines? And here's an MOS that you'll get. And I was sold on this idea that if I went and I was a fiscal budget technician, that I'd have a marketable skill that I could use when I got out and go find another job. And I said, hey, yeah, but I want to crawl around in the dirt and I want to do all the fun Marine stuff. And he convinced me, oh, every Marine is going to do plenty of that. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Let's set you up for a profession afterwards. And he said, oh, by the way, and if you hook me up, because I guess he was in a bind, he had somebody that was supposed to go and they backed out at the last minute. So their recruiter is in a bit of a bind. And he said, all right, if you do this for me, I don't know where this thought or where this bravado or gusto or like nerve even came from. I was like, hey, Gunny, if I'm gonna go to if I'm gonna do this for you, then I need you to hook me up with a promotion out of boot camp. So at the time, maybe they're still doing this, but at the time, if it's like an MLM scheme. Like if you refer two buddies and they join, then you get
Yes.
then we'll promote you. And I knew that was the deal. So I said, hey, look, I don't have two buddies to give to you, but I know that you can work some paperwork magic on the back end. I need to be an E2 when I graduate boot camp. And he was in such a bind that he bit it, and off I went. So maybe
Good for you. Good for you.
it
That's
was,
great.
yeah, maybe that was the last thing I finagled in the Marine Corps career. But so yeah, so I went and I had orders. The other thing that he hooked me up with was I wanted an overseas duty station. I said, if I'm gonna do this thing, I want to go all in. I want to experience everything I can experience. So part of my contract was that my first duty station would be overseas. I wanted that little sea service deployment ribbon that you get if you serve overseas. So when I graduated from my MOS school, though, many months later, the fall of '99, I had orders to K Bay, Hawaii. And crazy as it sounds, I turned down those orders because I wanted to go overseas, and K Bay, Hawaii, or Honolulu wasn't considered an overseas duty station.
Right.
So I swapped those orders out, and I went off to Okinawa, Japan, as a young 19-year-old, alone, scared, and afraid Marine, and served my first year over in Okinawa.
Oh, good for you. That's fantastic. That's an incredible experience right there. So no
Mhm.
no regrets on that. You can go to Hawaii anytime. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. But I wouldn't have gotten that little sea service deployment ribbon if I was in Hawaii. It's like, come
Right.
on, I need to start getting some recognition on my chest.
Right. Right. That's fantastic. And yeah, that MOS you mentioned, this is what's fun about the show and our audience is, we learn, everyone has different roles, different skill sets. So
Mhm.
um, people don't realize that the military is a people business, right? We have people, which
Absolutely.
means they need everything.
It's a whole company. Yeah. And that's one thing I became to understand and really appreciate is for every combat arms MOS, or for every Marine or rifleman that's either in the infantry, in the artillery, in the tanks, whoever those warfighters are that are going forward, there's 3 or 4 Marines that serve in service positions or service roles, doing the logistics, doing the administration, doing the safety. There's so many other roles and positions that are there that are needed. And yes, in the Marine Corps, we take pride in the fact that every Marine's a rifleman. So regardless of what you're doing, if you're working in a chow hall, if you're pushing pencils or doing Excel spreadsheets like I was, then you still have to go qualify on the rifle and spend a little bit of time in the field getting muddy each year.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And then, so you joined in the 90s. That was my era as well. I joined 97, so couple years off there, but of course the world changed not too long. So you started as an enlistment, you were enlisted,
Mhm.
and you're basically getting the idea of what's going on. You're in Okinawa, And then of course the world changed in 2001.
That's
So
right.
walk us through some of those next phases and
Yeah.
steps there.
Yeah, I did a year in Okinawa. I got orders back to headquarters Marine Corps in Washington, D.C., and we were stationed in the building that was the former building known as the Navy Annex, which has since has been bulldozed, and the real estate's been acquired by the cemetery. But it's right next to the Pentagon, right up the street. So I worked there in an office for a couple of years, going to school, working on college classes, and knew that I wanted to. There was a beautiful program that I'd heard about, and I don't know. One of the things I've done in my life regularly is, if I'm interested in something, I'm going to put my name in the hat. I'm going to try it out, and instead of kind of living with that regret. So this is one of those times I heard about this program. It's called the MECEP program. It's an enlisted commissioning and education program. 1,000 or more Marines apply for it every year. They take 100 or less. But for those that are selected, you get this opportunity to go to college, and the Marine Corps pays for it, or you use your GI Bill to pay for the tuition. But you stay on active duty orders, and your duty station now is an ROTC unit attached to a university, and you have an opportunity to get a degree. So I was sold on that. I wanted to do it. Again, I didn't know what I was going to do for the rest of my life, but if I could squeeze some more benefits out of the Marine Corps and have some more experiences, at the time it was, you go to college for 4 years and then you come back and you'll serve as an officer for at least 4 years. And I thought, it's not a bad deal. So I did that. I went to University of Maryland, studied mechanical engineering, and then in 2006 graduated from there. And also there was this opportunity at the time to, as you're thinking about what you want to do as an officer, I realized that, hey, being a pilot in the Marine Corps, that's one of those things. And ever since I was in seventh grade or so, I remember having this fascination with aviation and just wondering what it'd be like to be up there in an aircraft flying around at night or flying around overseas. So I wasn't sure if I'd be physiologically qualified. I had an unfortunate accident when I was 10 years old and had a TBI and a subdural hematoma. So I wasn't sure if that would physiologically disqualify me. So again, put my name in the hat, see what would happen. Figure the worst case is they'd say no, but I wouldn't have to spend the rest of my life wondering. And the stars aligned, and I was selected to be a pilot. So I graduated, and that started a couple of years of flight school. And ultimately, I was trained up and certified to fly the most beautiful aircraft in the Marine Corps arsenal, I think, which is the KC-130 Juliet,
Yes.
and had an opportunity to fly a lot of different missions.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's just that right there, just a transition from an MOS to a new, and like you said, just putting your name in the hat.
Mhm.
This is what's great about our freedoms, this is what's great about the military. You never know. I mean, there's so many opportunities, but you'll never know if you don't at least try,
That's
right?
right. Absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, the same for everything in life. If you got an interest in something, it's something I encourage a lot of people to do. I still do some coaching or recovery coaching with individuals, and sometimes if we lose that momentum or we've gone through some challenging times and it affects our self-esteem or our confidence, then maybe we'll lean back a little bit from those things that we want in our life. Maybe we don't feel that we deserve it. Maybe we're afraid of what might happen. But I always encourage people, kind of lean into it. If there's something inside of you that feels pulling you in that direction, then go investigate it, lean into it, and try things. The saddest thing is when you let all your years slip by and you don't try or lean into some of those things that you're more passionate about and the things that you really like.
Agreed, agreed. That's fantastic. So quite the leap and speed trajectory your career took there with the Marine Corps. And of course, we like to say, you went from enlisted to commission, so it's a Mustang, right? That's still the term.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
Mustang.
right.
So of course, if you're gonna be a Mustang, you got to be fast. So of course, you're gonna be a pilot. Yeah.
Certainly. That's right. And that's one thing I love in the Marine Corps. I think, and I've been out for a number of years now, but one thing while I was in, there were a lot more Mustang officers, especially company grade officers in the Marine Corps than many other services. And one thing that the Marine Corps was doing a little differently at the time is they were trying to identify young Marines with that potential or that interest and trying to help them transition into the officer corps at a younger age. There were some programs in the Navy at the time where they would try to take people that were, chiefs and help them commission the company grade officers. But in the Marine Corps, they really saw the wisdom or the value of, like, let's help them make that transition earlier. They can bring all their experience, the wisdom, the skills, the strengths that they have from being a young enlisted Marine with that perspective of what it's like to be an E2 and E3, and carry that or allow that to carry over to the officer corps. I think it makes much better officers to kind of have that experience,
Mhm.
and that's one thing I really appreciated about it.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. My time in the Army and Army National Guard, even when I was in the battalion, you know, command center and things like that, I'm not taking anything away from someone that commission
Hmm.
from day one. I'm not taking anything away at all. There's a
Certainly.
value to that as well. But
Absolutely.
it is absolutely clear. Like you spent a little bit of time working with people, you can tell the
Hmm.
difference between folks that came up through the ranks a little bit as an enlistment and then commissioned. It's just a different characteristics or leadership skills because they were that private getting screamed at, dress right, dress with the rocks and everything
That's
else.
right.
So
Yep.
there's a little bit of an understanding that when you're giving the orders, you've been on the receiving end. And
Hmm.
I agree with you. It does give you like a level up on your leadership skills.
Right. Yeah, and I've certainly worked with plenty of just amazing, Marines and service members that weren't prior enlisted.
For sure.
Yeah, so certainly it doesn't take anything away, but for those that have that experience, for a lot that have that experience, and then there's every once in a while, there's the people that I think are dragged into the officer corps through their ego, and they think that it is a stamp of approval. It's like an ominous dominus. Now you're better than other individuals. Unfortunately, I saw that too, and it's sad to see that, but
Yeah.
it's part of. I'm sure you find that in every organization and
Yeah,
culture.
it's a small percentage, but there are some that just go for the rank and they miss the bigger points. So they miss. I actually
Mm,
feel bad for those individuals because they missed out on being part of something that I mean, I think the military is the most incredible organization ever. I think the
mm,
Marine Corps, even though I was Army, I think the Marine Corps is, and we've said this quite a bit on the show with our Marine friends. The branding of a Marine is by far the best branding in the world.
yeah. Yeah.
So to be a leader in the best branded branch of the best organization, it's incredible, and I feel bad that folks didn't see and participate fully in what that could have been.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's an interesting point. I'm going to put a bookmark there because I'm going to circle back and talk about exactly how that some of the benefits and certainly some of the upside of that also creates a challenge on the backside with transitioning out. But I know we'll get into that in a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah,
So just
agreed,
want to
agreed.
put a bookmark there.
Yeah. So okay, so now what years are we talking here where you've become a pilot? You did how many years?
Yeah, so I graduated from college in 2006, May of '06, and then got my wings in February 2009. So it was a couple flight schools, couple moves down to Pensacola to learn how to fly a single engine plane, out to Corpus Christi, Texas to learn how to fly maritime or multi-engine plane, and then back to Cherry Point in North Carolina, which is actually I retired and still live right up the road, but came back here to learn how to fly the C-130s. And then from 2010 to 2013, I had the opportunity to fly in a C-130 squadron. And I saw one of the things that you typically ask is, some places that you've seen or some places you traveled to. Well, when the C-130, when they toss you the keys to a Herc and a full tank of gas, there's all kinds of places that we went to. But that's one thing I so loved about flying. I love traveling. I love getting to different places, and the idea that I can wake up here in North Carolina, eat lunch down in Louisiana, and then be back home for dinner. Like I don't know, there's something really neat and about that.
it's
And then when we
incredible.
take it abroad, to hop in the plane and today I'm in North Carolina, tomorrow and next week I'm in Spain and in Italy, and then duck down to Greece, maybe fly down to Africa, and then I'm back home, 10 days later, 2 weeks later. I mean, it certainly changes your perspective on the world. And actually, there was some experiences that I had there that really inspired some of the work that I do after the service or since I've retired from the Marines. But it really opens up your perspective and your appreciation, at least it did for me, to understanding the way that the values and beliefs and the culture that we're a part of and the experiences that we had in our life really shape the way that we experience life, both, from an individual perspective and then larger at scale from a cultural perspective. I mean, there's things that people worry about around the world that we've always taken for granted just because of where we come from or the resources that we have available to us as we're experiencing this life here in America. There's challenges that we face that other people don't face because they don't, there's whether it's through technology or social media challenges or just our connectedness that we have here that other individuals don't experience both either the positive of or the potential consequences of. But that's something that I really appreciated. So flying around the world, I got to see some of the most beautiful places in and around Europe and just meet some amazing individuals, see some very beautiful things, learn a lot about the history of different cultures. And also I had the opportunity to fly into some of the most destitute places and impoverished places around the world. So I think it was that contrast between the two really kind of laid a foundation, I guess, from my perspective, my understanding, and then some of the passions that I've carried since the service.
Yeah, it gives you a true world view of. I mean, it's just yeah,
Hmm.
it's incredible. All right, so
And it
then
really kind of snaps me out of this. So I think all of us, we live a life through our own perspective, and our perspective is derived by the values and beliefs that we accumulate as we age or as we mature. And I've really gained an appreciation for how much those values and beliefs that we can adopt as our own are in many ways kind of offered up to us through the experiences that we have. And I only point that out because somebody that has different experiences, they might develop a different perspective, different values and beliefs that really guide their perspective and their understanding of the world and their understanding of the place in the world. So with that knowledge, I guess, with that understanding, it's really helped me when some of the beliefs or values that I have don't lead me in a good direction or have created challenges in my life to understand that, maybe the belief or the value that I'm holding might not, it's might not be like a mathematical truth that that belief or that value is true. It might be true for me, or it might be true for other individuals. That doesn't invalidate what that brings to somebody's life. However, if that belief is guiding us or guiding the way that we feel about things, or the way that we show up in certain circumstances, and we don't like that outcome, or we don't like the way that some of the consequences or the costs that that's creating in our life, then we can always come back to and delaminate those values or the beliefs that we have and see, what is it? So, kind of dancing around it. But in 2013, during one of my first deployments with the C-130s, I remember this experience where I had been working so hard in the Marines. I've been working my way up the ladder. I've been getting new quals on the C-130. I've been so focused professionally on my the EWS or the grade level school that I was engaged in. So all this time we're flying. I'm also serving in some ground billets. I'm also working towards my PME, my professional military education. And all of these things really took all of my focus and attention. So at 2013, I deploy. I've been upgraded. I'm now an aircraft commander. I'm EWS complete. So I'm done with my career level school. And it provided this opportunity. There was so much space now, so much space for me to reflect over my life, how things were going, things that were well, things that weren't going well. But it provided this rare opportunity for me to kind of have that headspace and that time to reflect on some things. And the conclusion that I came to was that I was pouring everything that I had into the things I was engaged in. And the return that I was getting from it, as far as joy or fulfillment or happiness, was minimal at best. So I was giving 100% of what I had and maybe getting a 10% return. I mean, I felt my cup was empty. I didn't feel great about myself. There were some challenges I was experiencing in my life and relationships, my physical health. And I realized that, hey, I'm pouring everything that I have. I'm doing the best that I can and pouring everything I have into this. And I'm not getting much return. And I'm still feeling kind of empty inside. When I lift my head up from what I'm engaged in, I had this realization. And I came to this conclusion. One of two things was going on. Either life was just kind of this sick joke that we're supposed to suffer through and then die at the end, or there were some fundamental values, beliefs, and understandings about the world or about my place in it that I had gotten wrong, and that's what was creating some of these challenges in my life. So, hoping that it was the latter, hoping that there were some things that I could learn to kind of steer me back to a better path. It inspired me to really lean into some education and bring some curiosity to investigating some of the things that I'd learned and picked up over my life that were kind of creating the situation that I was in. So that's a long lead into the premise behind my first book, or one of the first books I published, which is called The Spheres Approach to Happiness and Fulfillment. So it was the best philosophical understanding I could come up with about why or how some things in the world were affecting the way that I was showing up and affecting the way that I felt. And then more importantly, providing a path or some navigating tools to get out of that situation for anybody who's experiencing something similar, experiencing a version or an existence or a phase of their life that they just don't love, or they don't like the way that things are showing up. They feel disengaged, they feel overwhelmed, they feel too stressed, they feel that they're not making much of a difference. They don't have the joy and fulfillment. Well, if you're curious enough and you want to investigate some of the things that you might be able to see differently or change in your life, then that could be a great place to start.
Yeah, you're writing and so you wrote that while you were still in the service, that first book, correct?
I did. I mean, I wrote most of it. It was really kind of as I was transitioning out. I have to look at the publication date. It might have been 2016. But yeah, a big part of that really came out of the journals that I was writing,
Yeah,
and this own kind of like journey into self-discovery. And actually the reason I started writing it down, so I noticed a couple things. And for anybody that's on this kind of self-discovery path, or this has this desire to learn some more, what I realized was, as I was reading a lot of different books, so I was watching a lot of books, watching a lot of TED Talks, watching a lot of, pre-recorded seminars, going to some even different religious services that were on the post that we were at. I really just wanted to kind of see, investigate everything that I could. And what I realized was I saw these common threads kind of showing up. So something that I heard about or read about in this book would be reflected or shared a different way in this other book. So what I wanted to do is start capturing some of that. So as a father, I was a father at the time. I'm still a father, but as a father, I think one of the values that I have is I want to learn some things and pass that on to my children so that I can help them avoid some of the mistakes or some of the pain or the suffering that I experience. And I really felt like I was learning some things that could create a fundamental change in my own personal philosophy or my own personal life experience. So I wanted to share that. So one thing I noticed was that by reading a lot of books, I was seeing some common threads, some things kind of showing up in different places. So when I started capturing it in notes, I felt that I was getting so much deeper of an understanding of some of these new things that I was experiencing. And I thought, man, this would be great to kind of pass on to my daughter someday. There's some lessons that I was learning in my 30s that if I could help her grasp some of these things in her teens and help her, kind of go down a different path, and that would be awesome. And as I noticed as I started, now my journaling took a different tone to it because now it's not
Sure.
me just trying to capture in shorthand things that I was learning that I thought were fascinating. I wanted to remember, but it's okay. How do I explain this to somebody else? They say when you really want to become an expert in something, learn how to teach it because when you can teach it to somebody else, then you've really fully grasped it. So I noticed that, yeah, my comprehension and what I thought I was absorbing really went to a much deeper level. And that's what inspired me putting that message out there, not just it wasn't me just capturing my notes of things that I was finding that were really helpful, but me trying to boil that down or distill it down in a way that I could share it with other people. So that, then my journal or elements of it ended up becoming that book or the first draft of that book, The Sphere's Approach to Happiness and Fulfillment.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And kudos to you for doing that at a time of your transition,
Mm,
because I talked to a lot of veterans that the transition is chaotic at best. And they don't have time to process things and
mm,
something they eventually want to revisit, right? So you had a keen sense of being aware of like, oh, I'm starting to understand a few things and feel different, so the journaling process is great. And then I guess it sounds like maybe you edited it a little bit later when you realize, hey, it's not about just that I want to write this down, it's about who's going to be reading it and
right.
thinking about your as a parent thinking about the reader. So it's interesting. I mean, that's very interesting, and I would say rare. The timing of when you chose to start uh, writing that book,
Mhm.
and then to recognize that early on, for your
Mm.
first time for your first book, that's incredible, and I think that sets you apart from the crowd. There are first time writers.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm sure everybody has a kind of a story on that, where their message was born. And here's one thing, I guess, philosophically that I believe about creative works. And anybody can have their own opinion about this, but I think that when we are creative and we're in that sense of flow, so when I'm writing or when I'm capturing something that ends up becoming a book or even my TEDx talk, I feel that I'm receiving a message from something greater than me, and it's my job to use my mind, my hands on the keyboard, to capture that message in a way that it's supposed to be shared. So in that sense, I don't really take ownership of the message. I'm just grateful to be the conduit to share that message. So the beautiful thing about this is somebody who writes a book or publishes a book is if somebody really appreciates it and they give great feedback and they say it was really helpful, then that feels good because I feel like I captured that message the way that I was supposed to, and I pass it on, kind of intact or in its integrity.
right.
And if somebody doesn't like it, then it's a, hey man, it wasn't my message to begin with, and I'm sorry that I didn't capture it well enough to relate with you. I'm just, I tried my best to do my job.
That's great. That's fantastic. Okay, so walk us through now. So now you have retired from the Marine Corps at this point?
So 2015, so I was offered an early retirement at 16 and a half years,
Yeah.
just short of 17 years.
Yeah.
2015, transition out. So I kind of broadened my awareness or was developing this new philosophy, which I'm grateful that I did, in the years leading up to my transition, because I think it helped me navigate the real challenges of my transition, um, maybe more effectively. But for as many veterans do, when I transitioned out, it actually entered a very dark period of my life. Um, and what I've come to understand, I'm so grateful that I was offered an opportunity and I was offered some coaching. And I think maybe with this curiosity and this new, this curiosity about investigating things in my life and contributing factors to the things that I was experiencing, I'm grateful that I'd had that that kind of shift in my perspective a couple of years before I transitioned out, because I think that really guided me on that journey out of the dark place. Unfortunately, like many veterans, as I transitioned out, I felt this tremendous void inside. I'd lost something. There was this pain or this something that was missing inside of me, and it created a very scary situation. I also recognized that as I engaged in certain substances or did certain things, that I could escape from that pain for a little while, or at least fill that void inside. As I shared in my TEDx, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen it yet, but I ultimately got to a place where I had a friend come and take away the firearms from my house, because I knew that I was at a place. I didn't know how close I was to crossing that line. I knew that 22 veterans a day were were kind of crossing that line, and I wasn't sure how close I was, and that in and of itself scared me. I couldn't, I didn't think it was maybe going to happen that day, that week, that month even, but I
Right.
couldn't tell how close I was, and I don't know what that looks like to be one day before. I don't know what that looked like. So not being able to say with certainty that I wasn't there and I wasn't, one day away from crossing that line. I fortunately had a great friend that would come and helped me out and took away my firearms, and that just kind of provided me some little bit more space and comfort to investigate and continue that journey. Around that time, I was also introduced to the work of my now friend and mentor, Jack Canfield, who he's the co-creator of the Chicken Soup for the Soul and has been recognized as America's number one, I think, business coach or number one
Mhm.
coach. But he introduced me to a lot of things that helped me begin to understand and fill that void inside that I was experiencing, that darkness that I was in. He helped me better understand it, and then helped me with some tools and processes to start to navigate my way out of that place. And what I've come to understand, this is really the core message of my TEDx talk. What I've come to understand is that regardless of what a veteran experiences while they're in the military, that transition from military service itself can be traumatic. When we're looking at the post 9/11 population of veterans, it's reported that 1 in 5 post 9/11 veterans is going to experience or be diagnosed with PTSD in their lifetime. So this makes me wonder what was going on. So I was in this really dark place. Thank goodness I found some tools and some mentorship and some coaching to help me find a path out of it and get to a much better place. But all along, I'm looking back and I'm like, what the heck was that? Like, what was going on there? Where did that come from? Why do so many veterans struggle? The suicide is one thing that we think about, but the rates of mental health challenges, the rates of addiction or substance use disorder in the veteran population continue to skyrocket. What the heck was it that caused all that? And what I began to get clear on, and it took a number of years kind of looking back and reflecting on and continuing my education, but what I began to understand was that we have some basic fundamental human needs. Beyond our needs for food, water, and shelter, we have these basic fundamental human needs that they build the foundation and allow us to experience a fulfilling life. They allow us to flourish. They allow us to feel good about ourselves and about what we're contributing. And what these fundamental needs, what it comes down to, first and foremost, we have a need for connection. We have a need to be connected to people around us. We have this need to be a part of a tribe. For meeting our most basic physiological and safety needs, we need to know that other people have our back or that we're part of a group. Beyond our needs for connection, we also have this need for authenticity. So as we are experiencing and establishing those connections, we also need to have permission and the ability to show up just as we are. If we don't have that permission to be authentic, then what we often do is we'll start hiding behind masks. So we'll show up as a version of ourselves in order to be accepted. And this is normal. I mean, there's not something that's necessarily inherently wrong with this. I mean, it's normal as we adapt into new environments or we find our way in new places. The challenge is if all of our connections are formed with individuals as we're hiding behind a mask, then for one, the individuals that we're connecting with, those coworkers that are now, validating us or finding us acceptable, the people in our community that we're part of our tribe now, if they're only connecting with a mask, they're not connecting with us. So this leaves this impression on us and really sends this message to us that there's something wrong with me the way that I am, and I'm just not good enough as I am unless I show up as this version of myself. So the consequence of this is we might get connection. We might be part of a tribe. We might have this circle of friends, but if we're not showing up authentically, it's not satiating that need for connection. And it's actually making things worse because it's also relaying us to that message that can bring about shame or self-doubt or some other challenges. So beyond these two needs, then we also have this need for meaning. So meaning, it can be a great thing that provides joy and some positivity and direction in our life. But what I've come to understand, and especially through the work of Dr. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, is that meaning in our life also is what provides our capacity to endure suffering. So when you have that strong sense of meaning, whether it's because of your role in your community, whether it's because of your role in the family, when you have this sense of meaning that helps you identify with the value that you're providing or what you're contributing, this also helps you endure the hard and challenging times that you face. When we look at a veteran that transitions out of the military, they lose that connection to that brotherhood or that sisterhood that they've experienced. It's very difficult, if even possible, to replace that level of connection. They lose that authenticity. As many veterans, when they transition out, they realize very, very quickly that veterans, military members, were cut from a different cloth. We don't as easily integrate into a civilian population as you might think, which, we're all humans. You'd think, hey, I'm a human, he's a human, she's a human. We should all be able to get along and understand each other. But that doesn't necessarily, that's not usually the case with veterans as they transition out. And then that sense of meaning, if you were called into the service for that immense sense of meaning that comes from protecting others and serving your nation and protecting your loved ones, if that's taken away from you and your identity with it is stripped away from you, these three things come together to create that very dark place that a lot of veterans find themselves in.
Mhm. Yeah, agreed. I think a key difference that, we have listeners that are from all walks of life, which is fantastic for the show. The feedback's always interesting to me. But just the basic difference between being in the military, especially if you're full-time active duty, and then like that, you're back in the civilian world. When you're in the military, that's not just a job. That's not Monday through Friday. It's not an 8-hour shift job.
That's right.
It's a lifestyle. It's a whole cultural lifestyle. And it's got ingrained discipline because you have daily routines that are consistently enforced. And then eventually you do it to yourself. You're self-enforcing all of these daily routines and disciplines, whether it be physical exercise or just curfews, just all the details of and we're not even talking about combat or anything else, just a normal peacetime duty station. And then you go and leave that life and you're in a world of people who, let's say you go back to college. Well, a 22-year-old Army veteran is not going to have the same thought process or their focus is much different than, let's say, a 22-year-old civilian who just left mom and dad and now they're going to college. Right. Same thing in the private sector and the corporate sector. So I understand what you're acknowledging here and sharing with us is it makes sense that there's a lot of veterans who feel we almost have to put on a mask just to fit in. We don't want to be disruptive. If we want to just get that corporate job, we're going to pretend to be a corporate person. And you can do that for a while because a military's individual knows how to self-discipline. So it's almost like you're deferring authenticity, which is what you just said. So that the way you wrote that and the way you described it, it makes a lot of sense to me. It actually explains a lot of things I hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, and think about, when an individual joins the military, we're usually 18 to 22 years old. If you look at the lifetime
commitments.
That's right. Yeah, no kidding.
You can't even rent a car for a weekend in this country until you're 25. That's right. 18.
That's right. Here, grab this rifle. You're going to go off and do some things. That's right. But you think about, even from the human development perspective, our prefrontal cortex is not even fully developed at that time. Our ability to, to process or our capacity to have this understanding, this contextual understanding of who we are and what our place is, like that is developed while we're in the uniform. So everything that we know about ourselves, and one of the ways that I describe it as a veteran transitions out, whether this is after 4 years or 20 years, is in many ways they're going through an adolescence again. Because for many ways they're finding themselves in a new environment. And now they have to figure out, who are they? What's their place in this, just as an 18-year-old does when they leave home and they go to college, or just as a college graduate does when they leave college and they go find their way in the new world. And not understanding that can be very jarring. When you're 40 years old, you have this long list of accomplishments. You've done all these things and now you don't know who you are and you don't know how you're supposed to show up or what your place is or what your role is. Yeah, that can be very challenging. Because to me, it was really interesting. I mean, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take off the uniform. I'm still a human. I'm still living in the same house, the same community. I'm still shopping at the same grocery store, going to the same restaurants. It didn't seem like it was going to be that big of a shift because, I'm still just me and I'm showing up and doing the same sort of things outside of the military role. But it was, everything about it was different. And you quickly become to confront that a lot more and realize it, for everything that they develop in us as a service member. Everything is mission focused and everything, especially in the Marine Corps, is looked through the lens of life or death. If you ever ask a question, why are we doing the X instead of Y, the answer usually comes back to, well, it's going to help protect life or make us more lethal on the battlefield. So when you live your whole life looking through that lens, it can be very challenging to transition into that corporate world. And for a lot of individuals, they begin biting their tongue, or they realize, they still need that connection. They still want to be acceptable. So they start hiding parts of themselves that is just as big a part of their identity as anything else. And when we have to start doing that, when we have to hide a part of us in order to feel accepted, that has some real dire consequences.
Yeah, agreed. And then with the added layer of complexity of then looking back at your military career and saying, wow, I really joined at a young age. Was that really what I was supposed to do? And then you start to self-doubt, and you almost go through this period of time where you kind of felt you were duped or something like that.
Right. That's
which
right.
may or may not have any merit, but I think every veteran goes through that thought, whether they want to admit it or not, at some point, because you're young, like you said, you're young, you're still developing as a 26, 27 years old for
That's right.
people that completely fully develop their brain. So I think you go through that period of time also, and then if you're not in a good situation where you can talk to someone that has a flu, if you're completely isolated, then it's even harder to even recognize what's happening with you, not to mention trying to address an ops plan on how to really get through it. So
That's right. And that isolation thing, that's a huge factor that really affects a lot of veterans, because what I hear, and I'm talking to individuals, they're recovery coaching or just talking with veterans about what their experience is like. A lot of them say, I'm just happier being alone. I'm just more comfortable being alone. So I don't go out anymore. I don't really have much of a social life. I stay home. I stay to myself. And what I hear in that, as I kind of investigate it through this lens of our human needs, what I hear is that they don't prefer to be alone. They prefer not to feel awkward or uncomfortable when they're out trying to foster these connections. So their isolation, or they're choosing to be alone, whether it's self-isolation or situational, their isolation is a protective measure against that discomfort, against that feeling of rejection that they don't want to experience. However, it doesn't mitigate our need for human connection. Just because you feel uncomfortable with it and you'd rather not feel that discomfort and you isolate, it doesn't do away with that need that we have for the human connection. And a recent Surgeon General report that came out, something that's been studied a lot, is the negative effects of isolation or lack of connection. And what this recent report showed was that a lack of proper social connection has the same negative health effects as smoking 15 cigarettes or drinking more than 6 alcoholic beverages every day.
wow.
So now these individuals are in a place where they're self-isolating because they're more comfortable being alone than feeling that awkwardness or feeling like they don't belong. So they isolate, and then they have these negative effects of it. We need connection with other people in order to do the most basic things, even emotionally regulate, even deal with some of those challenges. So for a veteran that's lost their tribe, that's lost their sense of connection, now they feel more comfortable being alone because it feels too awkward to try to make new connections. They're losing this whole foundation for emotional and mental well-being and really experiencing a good life.
Wow. I hadn't realized that there was a study that showed that much of a difference there.
Yeah, it's very surprising.
Yeah. Oh, that's wild. Well, I don't want to skip over anything here, so I'm gonna just pause for a second, because our listeners are extremely supportive of our veteran guests. I want to make sure I don't miss anything, because you're so talented. You have so many different ways that you're different projects and things. So I first discovered you through the TED Talk, which I'm going to highly recommend everyone watch. So I want to make sure I'm clear about where our listeners can find that presentation. But then also, please don't be bashful. Please list the titles of your books and the best way to show support. So if there's a particular website or somewhere where that you most you benefit the most from, please let us know so we can support you.
No, I appreciate it. So it's certainly the one thing I would ask a favor of is everybody go check out the TEDx talk and then share it with any veterans or loved ones of veterans that you know. So my biggest message with that, it's a 10.5-minute talk, but it really drives home this point of the connection, authenticity, and meaning. And what inspired me most to do it was realizing, as my own transition journey out of the military, and whether it was through TAP classes or TRS classes or whatever your branch calls it, there wasn't any preparation for the mental, emotional, and even spiritual challenges that so many veterans face when they transition out. So the message through the TEDx talk, which is called The Unspoken Trauma That All Veterans Face, really delves into that. And my intent for sharing that message, I just want to plant a seed. So one of the hardest things about going through that dark and challenging time was not understanding why. Just like if you or I were to go out for a really hard workout or a long run today and we were sore for the next couple of days, that would make sense to us because like, hey, I went through this thing, now my body's sore, it's recovering. That makes sense. But because we knew why our body was sore or why we had these aches and pains, we would also understand that it's going to pass and we'd have hope that things were going to get better. If you find yourself in a very difficult or challenging situation and you're not sure how you got there, then it can be hard to even find that sense of hope that things are going to get better or even see a path out of it. And that's why so many veterans now are turning to substances. So many that rate of suicide continues to increase because the fear, that lack of hope, the isolation, all of these things come together. So in 10 and a half minutes, it was my message or my mission to share, at least plant a seed. So before a veteran transitions or while they're in that dark place, they have a clear understanding of what's going on and have some hope and some guidance on how to get out of it. So if you can check out that video and share it with any veterans or loved ones, this is also extremely helpful for friends and family members or professionals that work with veterans to have that context and have a clearer understanding of what they're dealing with so they can be able to better support and understand their journey out of it. So if you can check that out, the best place to see it is at the website. It's called unspokentrauma.vet, and I'll share that link with you if you want to push it out in the show notes. You go to unspokentrauma.vet, you can watch the TEDx talk there. There's also an opportunity, if you're interested, to host a virtual watch party. Basically, what that means is that we'll find a time, we'll put it on the calendar, and I'll jump into a Zoom room with you and as many friends and colleagues that you'd like to get in the Zoom room. We'll watch the talk together, and we'll have an opportunity to share and ask questions afterwards. So much growth and so much healing can come from just having that safe, supportive place to share our own individual stories and journeys. So I'd love to offer that to anybody. And there's no cost for that. You can do it as many times as you want. Just get some people together. Anything you can do to help me spread this message out and help more veterans hear it, it would be greatly appreciated.
Well, that's fantastic. The viewing party is interesting. So perhaps maybe like a group of healthcare providers would like to look at this as a topic. Maybe they have a meeting coming up. They can schedule something like that where they include this as part of their training for the day, or heck, even
Certainly, and on that note, I do a lot of speaking with mental health professionals, just about working with the veteran population. And there's, for any way that I can support you, I regularly do webinars and presentations for any mental health professionals that want some CEs. Then I'm even certified by NADAC, or the National Association of Addiction Professionals, to provide this training, and it comes with some CEs. So that's also an opportunity.
Oh, good for you. That's fantastic. I was actually that's offline. I was going to ask you if you had that. I didn't want to bring that up, but that's great that you can do that because especially in our area. So I'm upstate New York. We
Mhm.
have some incredible healthcare facilities here. We have two very large VA hospitals on top of University at Buffalo Medical School, which is a training
Mhm.
hospital. Excuse me, I apologize. There's medical courses there, doctorate degrees, but the VA hospital is literally across the street from them.
Mm.
So one of the things that comes up a lot in my world up here, my veteran community world, is we have a very high veteran population. Erie County, New York is the last time I saw an actual number, I believe it was just over 80,000 registered veterans to the main hospital, which is in Buffalo. There's another
Wow.
one about 40 minutes away, but the one in Buffalo has about 80,000. And one of the main, we'll say, themed complaints, and I want to clarify for our listeners who I know work there, we are very impressed, and there's a lot of passionate, hardworking people there. We love it. Buffalo is now one of the better facilities in the country. However, there's a disconnect when you go there for an appointment, and maybe your intake is a 19-year-old UB student
Mhm.
who's never been in the military. There's a disconnect there. And it doesn't
Mm.
seem like a big deal, but if
Mhm.
you're going to the VA hospital for the first time and it's at a time of crisis and you have to initially sit with someone who's never been in the military, isn't a doctor yet, but working towards it, and all the best intentions of the world. But if they're
Right.
going to, the government's very structured now with these questionnaires you have to fill out.
Mhm.
So as part of your appointment enrollment, you literally have a 19-year-old at times that will sit there and say, like literally within the first minute of meeting this person will say, well, how much do you drink? Do you feel suicidal? Things like this.
Mhm.
Nothing wrong with those questions as
Right.
part of the procedure, but
Except that you'll never get a straight answer.
you'll never get a straight answer. But also, there's people that like and God love you. We really do. There's not a veteran I know who doesn't acknowledge what I'm about to say. We know that there are people who could make a ton of money doing the same job somewhere else, but they choose to work at the VA because they love veterans, and we appreciate that. We
Hmm.
do. But it would be important for healthcare providers to learn from you, and maybe from this conversation that we're having right now, that that Marine or airman or soldier or what have you walking through the VA for the first time that might have been discharged decades ago, they didn't wake up that day and say, you know what, I'm going to go to the VA today. That's something that took them probably months or
Right.
longer to get the mental clarity that their problem is at such a level that they really do
Hmm.
need to go start dealing with it.
Right.
And it's not easy for someone who was in the military to acknowledge that they
Hmm.
got something going on. So when they
Right.
get to that point and they take those steps and they make the call or they go online and they get the appointment and then they actually go and show up at the appointment, which is something that doesn't happen a lot, they need to understand. There needs to
Hmm.
be a conversation there with someone that's ready for that conversation.
Right.
And
Right.
if you feel you're just getting grilled by a teenager because they have to check the list on a chart and they don't feel that it was a serious engagement,
Hmm.
I would argue that the math indicates that that's why first appointments don't turn into second appointments.
Sure.
They don't come back.
Sure.
So what you're doing, I commend you
Yeah,
because
I'd love to see a world where every first intake, the first thing that's offered to you is a hug and then a thank you for doing something for you because we love you as a veteran. We appreciate your service and thank you for being willing to do something uncomfortable for your benefit and taking care of yourself.
yeah, and there's no veteran that expects everyone in the VA to be a veteran.
Right.
That's silly. No one expects that.
But you
But
should have a clear understanding of what
right,
that. So on that note, anybody, if you work at the VA, I would love to come and do any kind of presentation. We can do it virtually. I can do it in person because in an hour, I think what's been told to me is I can paint a very clear picture to help people better understand the challenges that a veteran's facing.
yeah. So if you're listening now and you're with the VA, and I'm going to get you in contact with some folks up here in my area, but we broadcast all over, and of course, it's a streaming, so who knows where people are listening to
Hmm.
it today. But yeah, folks, I would highly encourage you to engage this Marine and get some of this information and knowledge to the front lines of healthcare. How's that? How's that for a little
There we go. I
words
love it.
there? Yeah.
I'll actually be up in upstate New York in 2 weeks or so. I don't know
Oh,
if this episode will have aired by
yeah,
then, but
yeah.
we'll
Well,
talk offline. I'd love to
yeah,
see
we'll
if I
talk
can.
offline. We'll definitely do that. We'll get together. So, well, thank you so much. I do want to have. I got two more questions for you.
Please.
So, you're a very impressive leader and orator. There's just so much about you that's impressive. But I want you to think back to when you were on the subordinate side. Even when you were enlisted in the first couple years of your career. Um, Among your time in the military, is there a particular leader that you had, or just a lesson that came about,
Mm.
maybe from a peer, and not a leader, but is there a particular leader lesson that gave you something that you really believe, if it wasn't for that experience, kind of like a life hack, if you will, that you think
Sure.
you probably only could have gotten in that situation with the military?
Certainly something I've come to appreciate, and maybe this is through my journey starting out on the enlisted side. It was something that was expressed to me really that I started picking up from my mom at a young age, and then was reinforced and developed in different ways. And what this is just having real compassion and connecting with individuals at an individual level, understanding that everybody is going through something different. Everybody has a different history of life experiences and circumstances, and the more that you can connect with somebody on an individual level, show that you are interested in them and care about them and care what they're going through, seeing beyond all the status stuff, all the whatever it might be, all the ornaments, all of the circumstances that are surrounding you. If you're connecting with an individual, that's a beautiful place to be. And when you can demonstrate to somebody that you see them that they're valuable to you, then so much can come from that. And this relayed into my military career by the way that I would connect with the young Marines that worked for me. So as I became an officer and as I kind of went up the ranks, I never I would always try my best to connect with individuals, whether it's the 19-year-old Lance Corporal PFC, and hear their story and hear what they were going through and try to see things through their perspective. Fortunately, I had a little bit more of an understanding. I got to see behind the scenes by living in the enlisted ranks for a couple of years myself.
Yeah.
But the more that I could bring that awareness and that appreciation and understanding through whatever they said, whatever their behaviors were, however they saw the world, that like if I was to look through the world through their set of lenses, through the lenses that were developed through the experiences that they had or the situations that they were in, if I would look through the world through their lenses, I'd probably see and act the same way that they did. So anytime somebody either was either in disagreement with me or I didn't understand what was going on, if I could take a step back, look through the world through their eyes and try to imagine what their experience was like, then it really deepened that sense of connection, and it really deepened the respect and the connection that I got from other individuals that I was working with. So that's something that I certainly do carry with me, and just trying to recognize everybody and provide even in a very quick exchange, we can see other humans for who they are and the experience they're having, whether that's somebody that works with you or for you, or whether it's something so simple as connecting for a moment with the person who's checking you out at the coffee shop or the gas station, but just pausing for a moment. And I love to just stop and ask. It's awkward at times and disruptive at times, but just stopping and asking, "Hey, how's your day going?" And not rolling right into the next response, but creating that awkward space where they're like, "Hey, hold on." Somebody is like, we're having a real human exchange here, and this person actually wants to know about how I'm doing or what's going on. It's a beautiful thing. Like I said, it all comes back to a lot of our ability to experience joy and happiness and fulfillment in this life all comes back to the connections that we have and the connections that we foster. We shouldn't miss any opportunity to do that with everybody around us. We can all feel isolated. We can all feel unseen at times or underappreciated at times, when we can just provide a little seed or just offer that to somebody, even the shortest little instances or exchanges. It's a beautiful thing that happens for everybody involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Empathy is huge, and the world would be way better if everyone had just an ounce of that in their day.
Hmm.
So, yeah. All right. Well, final question. I don't know if this is a fun one for you or not. Sometimes it's fun, but I like the idea of time travel, because I always think, geez, the things I wish I knew way back when.
Right.
So if you had a minute or less, and the only thing you could do with a time travel machine was to go back and talk to yourself, what would you possibly tell that young man about to embark on all these journeys and adventures you've had? What would you say to young Garrett if you had a minute or less with him?
It's a great question. So I think the biggest thing would be to just wherever you are, be there. Fully absorb yourself into what you're engaged in. Try to get everything that you can from it. And as much as you can, release some of the worries or fears about what's going to happen next or about what's happening down the road. So just be where you are, be present, and gain everything that you can from the experience.
It's great. All in, regardless of the win. Yeah,
That's
that's
right.
awesome. I love it. All right, sir. Well, I can't thank you enough. I do want you to, if you don't mind, I'm going to bug you one more time for the main website where people can go to pick up to watch the TED Talk, to pick up your books, and I think some of your books would make incredible gifts as well, by the way. And also, if there's folks that want to engage you for speaking and consulting work, especially with the healthcare folks, please tell me again that website, and we'll make sure we have a link online for you.
Certainly, first and foremost, go to unspokentrauma.vet and you can check out the TEDx talk there. You can schedule a watch party there, and there's links where you can contact me or reach out to me. For anybody that's, if you want to go a step further, I'd love for you to connect with me. Anybody that would like to connect, the best place to do that's probably on LinkedIn. So Garret Biss, it's a unique name. I haven't found another Garret Biss on LinkedIn, but I'd love to connect with you. You can search for me there. And if you want to have any conversations, if there's any way I can serve you, support the work that you're doing, then please do reach out and let's have a conversation.
Excellent. Well, thank you again very much, sir. Folks, this is another talk with our highlighted veteran of the week here, retired Marine, but always a Marine, Garret Biss. And please show him some support. Follow him. Look at the messages he had on there online. I know that you and your community will benefit greatly from it. So thank you again, sir. And folks, we'll just take a quick break here. Stand by.